Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Financial Issues. Seth Udinsky here with you this morning, as well as Sam Case and the Studio A team. We're live here this Friday morning, February 28th, 2025. Happy to be here with you on Financial Issues. Make sure to join the conversation, folks, if you can. Best way to do it is to call in 610-363-1110. 610-363-1110 is the number to call into the show. Welcome to you if you're listening on one of our radio outlets or watching on one of our TV outlets or on social media. It's great to have you. Of course, on our website as well. Hello to the chat. Great to see all of you. Sam, good to see you, buddy. Excited for another show today. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we're ready to rock and roll. It's Friday, the best day.
That's right. Good stuff here. Yeah, folks, if you'd like to make it a Rapid Fire Friday, we'd welcome you to do so. Got to light up the phone lines to do that, though. So if you want to join myself and Sam in the conversation, again, 610-363-1110.
Well, you got to remember, with Dan in mind, it was never Rapid Fire Friday. It was Rapid.
It was Rapid Fire Friday. Exactly was. I love those Dan-isms. You know, so the way that he said words, like when he talked about smoke and mirrors, it was smoke and mirrors. You know, so always fun stuff there.
Someone, I remember one time, said, "I love your accent." He's like, "I call it a speech impediment."
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know. It really is true. It's the Philly accent is not always pleasing to the ears, but we'll wear it proudly, Sam, won't we? Although you have more of a Western New York accent.
Yeah, and that has its own problems.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got a packed show today, folks, so let's get to it. First of all, what do we make of credit scoring? A lot of talking heads in the financial space have something to say about credit scoring, good or bad, so we'll try to make some sense of it. That'll be our topic of the day. Also, again, your questions and calls, 610-363-1110. Also, egg prices continue to be not too excellent, as it were. The heavy cost is no yolk. So
this is going to be the whole show, by the way, guys. It's just going to be egg jokes. That's exactly all it is.
That's exactly
so buckle up.
Buckle up, folks. What's the Trump administration going to do about this? We'll see that, God willing, later in the show. Also, on a more serious note, Planned Parenthood has been, by God's grace, under attack since the tide-turning win for the pro-life movement with the ousting of Roe v. Wade, also by God's grace, back in June of 2022. The next step, cutting off its life source, namely your taxpayer dollars. We'll talk a little bit about a possible proposal that might be in the future for that. Great to be here with you, folks. But first and foremost, let's turn our attention now. Two big news stories of the day. We might get to one of them later if we have time, but the first one, I think, is these looming tariffs that are now going to be incoming early next week, it looks like, on our immediate neighbors to the north and to the south. Sam, what do you have for us with these tariffs looking like they'll be implemented on Mexico and Canada?
The tariffs are a coming, Seth. Yeah. So Donald Trump yesterday, he confirmed his proposed tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go into effect March 4th. These are the 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada. They were originally paused on February 3rd to see if that Trump can work out some sort of deal with the two countries, especially concerning the border. Trump said that drugs are still pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at very high and unacceptable levels. Therefore, the tariffs will go in place. That is, unless something can change once again over the weekend. By the way, Trump is also vowing an additional 10% tariff on China. That will also start on March 4th. So that brings Chinese tariffs to 20%. By the way, Seth, Trump also said this morning that those tariffs could go even higher. So we could be looking at 30% tariffs on China. And of course, in addition to those tariffs, Trump has also ordered steel and aluminum, which are set to take effect on March 12th.
Yeah, interesting stuff there, Sam, for sure. You know, I wish Canada and Mexico would come to the table and play. I mean, Trump gave them 4 weeks or maybe even a little bit more than that. I think it'd be better for us and for them. Apparently, as it stands right now, neither of those countries want to. Now, Sam, do you think there could be an opportunity over the weekend that we might hear about, hey, in the 11th hour, you know, Canada decided, all right, we'll back down a little bit, or Mexico did. Do you think there's any chance of that, or at this point?
It really wouldn't surprise me if they did. Trump was talking talking about this a couple weeks ago. He says, they really need us, and we don't need Canada at all when it comes to the grand scheme of things. So with Canada in particular, I would not be too surprised if they come to the table pretty quickly, because this is going to be disastrous, especially for Justin Trudeau, whose opinion polls are just in the tank, and I can't imagine this is going to help him anymore. For sure.
So it really does seem to be, in my opinion at least, this is a hearkening backwards to the way that it seems like the founding fathers did it, folks. When we talk about tariffs, and look, I know there's a lot of implications of this, but when we talk about tariffs, it seems to be like Trump is, I think in a good way, winding the clock back pre-1913, 16th Amendment, back to the old days when that was the main way that the federal government was funded. It was not through income tax, it was through tariffs. And so we'll have to see what happens here. Things could get interesting with this, folks. I do believe these tariffs will have a good long-term outcome, even if the short term might be a little painful, and it could be. Speaking of that, Sam, we had a very interesting day in the markets yesterday, having a lot to do with these tariff announcements. So yesterday, the day opened with a lot of partying because NVIDIA had that excellent Q4 earnings hit. The major indices rose, and so by midday, the indices were a little bit conflicted. They wanted to celebrate NVIDIA's earnings report, but they were also a little skittish because the news was growing and brewing that Trump's tariffs would indeed be implemented on Canada and Mexico in particular. Sam and I were talking about this yesterday. The markets are so fickle. It's not like they didn't know this. Sam, haven't we known about this for a month now? But now all of a sudden, now that it's so close, it seems like the markets woke up and realized, oh my gosh, the tariffs are going to happen again. It was pretty interesting for sure.
No, it always amuses me, especially because the day before, they were all worried about what NVIDIA was going to do. Then it was like, sigh of relief. Okay, what else can we worry about now?
That's right. It was a very short-lived sigh of relief. Reminder, folks, what are the markets driven by? It's not common sense and common reason and wisdom. It's fear and greed. And there was a lot of fear in the markets yesterday. I really do think so. So by early afternoon, the indices, they were mirroring what they'd been for the previous several days this week. The Dow was the winner while the other two indices were considerably down. Late afternoon, everything went positive. It was almost as if the major indices just forgot about NVIDIA's big earnings hit only hours earlier, and then they started to panic over that threat of the Trump tariffs. All three went down considerably, and that's how they ended yesterday. The Dow Jones, probably the least wounded, was down about 0.45%. The S&P 500 was down over 1.5%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ almost down 3 full percentage points as the day ended yesterday, right around 2.78%. Now, the pre-markets this morning, whether it's because of a somewhat expected personal consumption expenditures price index, which came in this morning, or if it's simply because the markets are tired from all the chaos, they're hanging around the flat line right now. Moderately positive is how they're being priced to open. Let me refresh my screen one more time because I'm about a couple minutes behind here. So the Dow Jones looking right around 0.2% in the positive. The S&P 500 is up more like a 1/6 or a 1/7 of a percentage point. The NASDAQ is right at the flat line. So we'll have to see how the markets close today after what's been a pretty chaotic week for sure. That's what we're looking like as they'll open in about 15 minutes. Sam, quickly here, before the end of this segment, can you give us just the updates? We did get the jobless claims yesterday. What did we get for weekly jobless claims that came out yesterday for the week ending February 22nd?
Sure. Jobless claims for the week ending February 22nd, as you just said, totaled a seasonally adjusted 242,000. That's up 22,000 from the previous week's revised level. It also beats out the estimate for 225,000. Pretty interesting here, though, Seth. Washington, D.C. saw an increase of 421. That's a 26% increase, and the largest number for the city since we've seen since March 25th, 2023. The new claims totaled just over 2,000. So that could be the start of the trickle effect of DOGE, some of the jobless cuts or the government cuts that we've seen in recent weeks, although it could be just the beginning of that, as the claim trend does not appear to be spreading to the surrounding areas where there's also plenty of government workers. So places like Virginia and Maryland, they saw only relatively small numbers for that week.
Good to know, Sam. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so the big news of yesterday and this morning was all that stuff having to do with the markets and the tariffs and stuff. The other big piece of news is the big news headline that didn't really come to be anything, Sam, which was the release of the Epstein files, which were apparently a big dud. And Sam and I were talking about this yesterday, folks. You know, it really was. I'm a little bit concerned with the Trump administration, with how this whole thing went about. It's just the optics of it don't look very good. It seems like someone wasn't doing their research. If you missed that news headline yesterday, there was a big hoopla around the Epstein files being released, and then only come to find out that basically everything that we already knew was what was in the files that were released. There's a lot more that has not been released yet, including the client list.
Yeah, so, it was so frustrating, too, because Pam Bondi made a big deal about this yesterday, saying, it's coming. And then she weirdly writes this letter saying, actually, on Wednesday, I found out I don't have all the information. So it's very odd and very frustrating. So you'd think that you'd want to have the goods before you actually try to drop the hammer, or else it's just a big boondoggle and embarrassment for the administration, which, in my opinion, it turned out to be.
Yeah. And you know, Sam, I am confident that this will get righted, but it's a little bit concerning. Again, the optics of it don't look too good. So we're not going to spend much more time talking about the Epstein files here because there's not really much more to say about them. But that's what we saw, today and yesterday, kind of the big news headlines here, folks. So coming back on the other side of this break, we'll start that conversation about credit scoring. I would invite you, folks, if you're interested in joining the conversation, call in 610-363-1110. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere. How is Timothy Plan continuing to lead the fight as you guys now enter your fourth decade of leading this fight of biblically responsible investing?
We've been too silent for too long, and we can no longer be silent. You stand up, like Ronald Reagan said, we're only one generation away from losing all of our liberty. Yeah. It has to be fought for. I wish it didn't. And you can fight for it. You don't need guns and ammunition and that. You can fight for it, especially with your dollars, because it's always about the money. And when the money starts impacting people, they start paying attention. When we launched this, they said it couldn't be done, but here we are 30 years later. They said you couldn't get competitive returns, but here we are.
What a tremendous testament of God's grace.
Go to financialissues.org/Timothy Plans to learn more about Timothy Plan.
Kids need the hope of Jesus. There's so much loneliness, brokenness, isolation, and bullying. Now, you and I, we have the opportunity to do exactly what Jesus said, to go and make disciples, right where they are, right inside their public school. The Lord has been building the impact of Crossroads Kids Club, and we ask for your help to pursue a vision of greater national expansion.
To join us, visit reachourschools.com. That's reachourschools.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support Preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through GA Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of GA Repple or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Folks, there are so many benefits that the FISM partnership offers. One of those benefits is the ability to hear Shanna's information on the conference calls, the partner conference calls, monthly conference calls that we do, where Shanna just gets to go into a little more depth than she normally can on the show. And so the conference call from last week is posted. I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to that conference call, please, especially as you're considering what to do about some of the recent ads to the buy list, different sectors, certain things like that. I would really encourage you to go back and listen to that if you haven't already. And I know some of you were on the call live but went back and listened again, as I did. I think that'd be a great idea for you to do also, because you'll always learn something. You might pick something up that you missed. So go ahead back and do that as soon as you're able to. Maybe after the show today, if you're taking a walk or going on a drive or somewhere like that, it'd be a good thing to do. All right, Sam, let's tackle this conversation here about credit scoring now. Before we get right into it, let me just ask the chat. If you all can share your thoughts, what do you think about credit scoring? Is it a good thing, bad thing? Should we try to have a high credit score? Should we try to have no credit? What do you think here? Sam, let's get it started here with, there's an interesting headline that we saw. The student loan borrower's credit apparently is getting slammed here pretty hard. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos for student loan borrowers right now because the grace period for paying back their loans has ended. So for COVID-19, for a good 4 years or so, people did not have to pay their student loans. And a lot of them didn't get the memo saying, hey, those loans have restarted. You have to start paying them. They didn't get the message from their loan givers saying, hey, start coughing up your money. So now any missed payment as of October is going to be reported as a 90-day delinquency. And as a result, people's credit scores are dropping by as much as 200 points, although it's unclear how many people are actually affected by this. There's still certainly a lot of people that are complaining about this on social media.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we could say a lot, as we have over the last couple years, about, the student loan saga, as it were, and, Biden wanting to forgive the student loans and the question of, should you really be buying something that you're not intending to pay back later on? We could get into a whole conversation about that. But Sam, I really do want to hone in on that credit score conversation in particular. Can you give us, because this is helpful for me and probably for our listeners as well, how is this thing calculated?
Yeah, right. Because people are freaking out now. They say, I'm losing 200 points. I spent so much time trying to build this credit score, and that might raise a lot of questions for other people saying, wait a minute, how do I even build a credit score in the first place? Right. Well, let's look at the FICO score. Just for a note up front, not every credit score is a FICO score, but it is one of the most common. Most people listening probably have a FICO score connected to their credit card, but these are factored by 5 things: payment history, amount owed, length of credit history, new credit, and credit mix. The top 2 things in that make up more than half of that calculation, though, are payment history and amount owed. So payment history, that takes into account whether or not you've paid back your credit amounts consistently and on time. It also factors in previous history, such as bankruptcies, collections, and delinquencies as well. Meanwhile, amount owed, that's the second most impactful. This measures the amount you currently owe relative to the credit you actually have. So say that your limit is $5,000. Are you consistently spending close to that $5,000 limit, or maybe even going past it? That's going to probably have some negative effects for your credit score. But those are the 2 most impactful factors for scoring your credit score, at least for FICO.
Absolutely. Sam, that's helpful. Thank you so much. Now, part of why, folks, I think this is such a controversial thing is because credit score and debt are positively related in some level. In order to be able to build up a credit score, a lot of times you might need to be in situations where you have debt that you're consistently paying off. Because of that, it makes it a pretty controversial topic here. There are some in the financial space who are adamantly opposed to the very idea of credit scores. I know one very prominent one, who I won't mention his name on air, but you might be able to put the pieces together. He gave this example one time of being able to buy an entire apartment complex because of his wealth, but he's unable to rent out one of the units in it if he wanted to be a renter in there because he has no credit score, because he doesn't go into debt. He pays for everything in cash when he can. There are others who look at it more of, this is a vital marker of a financially sound person, is having a high credit score, knowing what your credit score is. And the higher it is, the more financially sound and fiscally responsible you are. Those are kind of the 2 prevailing schools of thought. Now, our founder, Dan Celia, had a few things to say about this also. I'd love to share with you some of his wisdom. Let's hear what Dan had to say about credit scores, and particularly what to do about a low credit score. Here's Dan.
So the first thing I would do is, you're going to check her credit report, make sure there isn't something weird on there that's not hers. So do that first. Make sure you go through and clean it up. You'd be surprised. You'll see stuff, on there that's 20 years old or shouldn't be on there or whatever. And you need to get that removed. And then the best way to build her credit up, as painful as it is for me to say this, is to get a regular old credit card and charge some things, and do not pay it off at the end of the month. That doesn't really impact your score. The other thing is refrain from making applications for credit cards and refrain from making applications for a new car or anything. If you can refrain from that, if you have the ability to do that, that's a good thing, because that helps you a lot, particularly if you're making multiple applications. But I would look at a credit card. I would go back to what I did for my kids when they were in college. Was I got them a credit card. They didn't know it, but I got them a credit card, and I would charge things on it, like my gas or something. And then I would pay 4 or 5 payments, and then I would pay it off. Then I would do it again, and I had this cycle of doing that, because that really builds your credit score up. And my oldest daughter, I was able to tell her at some point that I had a credit card, because she was the frugal one. My youngest daughter was not the frugal one. So after she graduated college, she said, I think I need to get credit. I said, you got really good credit. You'll be fine. But that's the best way to do it. But look, don't ever waver. You're obviously a disciplined couple, because, it doesn't sound like you have a lot of debt or you've done a lot of that. Stick to that discipline. But as painful as it is, paying that stinking interest and paying that credit card off, stay focused on, don't be late one single day. I wouldn't be good enough to not be late. So I always, even now, if I get something, man, I pay it immediately. Now we have one credit card we use when we travel, which fortunately we haven't done in a while, and we pay it off at the end of the month. We always pay everything off at the end of the month. I have a gas credit card because I get 5 cents off a gallon for using it, so I use it. But I pay it off every month. But right now, you got to be just paying the $12 a month payment. And because that's what improves your credit score, and it's the best way to do it.
So I had a chuckle there, because Sam and I both know both of Dan's daughters. We know and love them very well. They're like family for us. And with Sam, we might need to invite them on the show sometime to confirm or deny their father's claims about their financial spending habits.
Are you really the frugal one? I know. Right. I wonder what they were thinking when they heard that. Saying,
absolutely.
Maybe they're like, he's right.
Yeah. For sure. But so, really good thoughts there from Dan. So let me give some thoughts in response too. I believe, folks, that aiming to have a good credit score can be a very good thing, especially considering the following. Here's the deal. Most people, not everybody, but most people, and I'd include myself in this, at some point in their lives need to borrow money for a good reason, purposeful debt. We're not talking about foolish debt here, folks. We're talking about you're buying a house and you need a mortgage because you don't have $500,000 in cash when you're 25 years old. You need to be able to have a mortgage. And so you go into purposeful, positive debt, what we would call that. It'd be great. Look, I would love if all of us had enough cash to be able to buy a home in cash or buy a business in cash. And you know what? Some of us do. And if you can, I think you should. Absolutely, I think that. The simple fact is, even the best and most wisest of us, we might not have that. Just might not have it. So if you can't pay for a house in cash, a good credit score can really help you if you need to get a mortgage, to get an affordable mortgage, good interest rate, all that sort of thing. That said, I do think at the same time, there can be some nuance here. There can be perhaps a need for wisdom when it comes to the credit score conversation. I believe credit score is a lot like fire. Fire can be a life-saving thing. It can also be something that kills you. So if a fire is in an appropriate setting in the right place, it can be wonderful. And it can be life-saving. If you're outside in the cold and it's really cold out and you build a fire, it could save your life. But if it jumps out of the fireplace and consumes the whole house, now it's a life-threatening thing. I think credit score can be the same way. It can be very dangerous. I can't stress enough what Dan said in that clip there. Do not use the "I want to raise my credit score" argument as an excuse to go into foolish debt. That's not a wise thing to do, so that you can just have something to pay down. That's not a smart thing to do at all. It's not wise. The great insight that I love what Dan said, I'll repeat it here, is pay for little things. Pay for little things. If you get a credit card, pay for something little. Pay for gas, pay for groceries, and then pay it off immediately. I agree with him 100%. I'm the same way. I would worry that when the end of the month comes, I might forget, if I don't have an automatic payment set up. So if you buy something, just pay it off immediately. And if it's gas, it's $20, $30. It's not like you're going into $10,000 of debt to put gas in your car. you're paying something small that you have the money for, and then you pay it off immediately, and that helps. I think that's a really good thing to do. I mean, literally, you pay for it at the gas pump, and you go home and you jump online and you pay it off like that quick. I would encourage you to do that. It could be a tremendous thing also to do for your kids, as Dan said. He did that for his daughters, helped build their credit. And I think it's common sense, but worth mentioning, folks. If you're using a credit card, a good principle is to do your best to never spend more than you can comfortably pay off in that exact moment. I think that's really wise. So just to kind of wrap it up, if you're looking to raise your credit score, paying for things with the credit card, paying off immediately, that'd be a good way to do it. I think that would. And the last point, again, if you have no credit score because you didn't need to, if you have the wealth to be able to buy things without going into debt, praise God for that. You might have no credit score, but you're also not going to have any debt. I think that's a great thing too. I think that's wonderful. So it's being content in the circumstance that you have, for sure. I think it's really good stuff. So folks, I do want to remind you again one more time as we bid farewell to our half-hour audience. We do have a conference call up on the partner side of the website, so make sure to check that out on the conference call page. Again, that's the partner side of the website, conference call page. Just hope you have a wonderful day of worship on Sunday and that you'll be back with us next week. For the rest of you, more financial issues coming up on the other side of this break. We'll look at some of those news headlines and we'll get to one of your questions as well. We'll be back right after this.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
We're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
If you don't get life right, you're not going to get all the other issues correct, period. It is the issue that impacts every other issue. Life is the central part of what keeps this republic together. It is the contract that the founding fathers passed down through multiple generations. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You don't have life, you don't have a republic. There is a temptation out there right now. And I want to just tell you we must resist it. There's this temptation that we cast this issue aside. How does that honor God? It doesn't. And if it wasn't for preborn, I would be super just confused and depressed, because there has never been, in my opinion, a more disjointed time in the pro-life movement. We need a machine to go up against the Planned Parenthood beast. Like, we have to play offense against the pro-abortion forces in this country, okay? We have to play offense. And preborn does it in this compassionate, merciful, godly way that is just so inspiring and amazing.
Pharrell came to Crossroads as a fourth grader. His name had been brought to my attention by the school principal. She was concerned about the direction he was heading.
I remember I wasn't the best kid. I got into trouble a lot.
He became a very active part of Crossroads Kids Club.
Mr. Engel, he was the leader that really impacted my life in so many ways. I honestly didn't want Crossroads to end.
We would invite all the students to come to our youth group here at Waterfront.
I felt God saying, come on, come to me. It felt like I was set free.
And I'll never forget the day when we had the privilege and the honor to baptize Pharrell.
I hugged Mr. Engel. I don't know if he understands. I'm truly, thankful to have him through the whole journey. If it wasn't for Crossroads, I probably wouldn't be in the place that I am right now. I wouldn't be a follower of Christ.
Help reach more kids like Pharrell with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurSchools.com.
We're enjoying our ourselves this morning, folks, on Financial Issues. I'm grateful for each of you joining us today. Thank you for listening. And, I do hope that you will call up your radio station. If you listen on a radio station, you're listening right now, perhaps in the car or something like that, call them up and thank them for airing Financial Issues if you enjoy the show. We appreciate our radio partners so very much. They help spread the word throughout the country. So wonderful to be a part of it. Let's see the markets here. We'll take a look there momentarily. Just opened. I need to refresh my screen here. Going a little slow. Here we go. So the market's opened relatively mixed, kind of negative, truthfully. The Dow Jones is right at the flat line. The S&P 500 is down a quarter, and the NASDAQ, following in yesterday's suit, is down now almost a full percentage point here. So could be a rough week for the major indices as the S&P 500 is nearing its worst week of the year so far. So we'll keep an eye out on that and see how the markets finish out here. Let's move now, though, to a couple questions we got. First, a great comment from the chat here. James in South Carolina. What do we got, Sam?
James says, I did my taxes last night. Well, James, good for you. You're a better man than I. I still need to do my taxes. He said, FISM helped us have a very good year, but now the powers that be want their quote-unquote fair share. And for good measure, he puts like 3 frowny faces in there. So I get it.
I share those frowny faces, James. That's so frustrating, those powers that be and those tax dollars. But well done, man. I'm so glad that FISM could help you have a good year. That's what we're here to try to do, of course, ultimately to help you honor God with your money. We also want to put forth companies and investments that you can really do a good job in. So we're doing our best to do that. And I'd encourage you, brother, taxes are the worst. They're so frustrating. But remember what Dan always said, too, that if you have to pay taxes, especially with your investments, it means you did well. So you won, as Sam says, right? You beat the system. No, you didn't beat the system. You just you did it well. And so that's the unfortunate reality of living in a place that has such tax laws like that. Well,
it's almost just the unfortunate reality of living, right?
It is.
Death and taxes,
exactly right.
as they
Death
say.
and taxes, man. Yep. Absolutely. But James, well done, man. I'm so encouraged by that. I hope that you're encouraged too. Great job getting those taxes done early. That's awesome. Yeah. What else do we have, Sam? I know we got Beth is asking a question there too.
Beth says, hi, I've been looking at the videos in the Investment 101 series. My question is, what do you do with the money you receive if you take profit from those stocks that have done well? I know that profit is not considered new money, but since it's a byproduct of good investment, so am I not to reinvest it? Thanks.
Beth, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it because I'm guessing that other folks might be wondering too. I know we've gotten this question before. Here's a general rule for you, and I think for anyone listening also, folks, if you're in Beth's situation, it is always good to reinvest the profits you make. Always good. I think that's an excellent thing to do, especially if, and this is oftentimes what happens, because of your profits, you're now out of balance. In order to rebalance, you might need to reinvest elsewhere. The profits that you made from your investments, it's perfect. That's a perfect way to use those. Your asset allocation might be out of whack, so you redeploy some funds, and now you're back to close to what the asset allocation model suggests. Those profit funds, perfect to do so. I think you're right on with that. So, yeah, if you've got those profits, I would argue maybe your first consideration is how can I redeploy these? How can I reinvest these in my portfolio? And I think it's especially true, if you're slowly building and your profits are not astronomical. I would urge you, don't even worry about taking a profit if it's small and you're only slowly building. You've been at it for 2 or 3 years, man, just keep going. Keep on going. But if you have considerable profits, maybe you're in a place where you can consider paring back on some of that, as we call it. You pare back on it a little bit and you redeploy it elsewhere. It's really not profit taking as the textbook definition of it is, because the definition of profit taking is you take your profits and you don't do anything with it. Ours is much more of you take your profits and you purposefully redeploy them to be able to continue in that long-term strategy. So I think that's a great thing for you to consider first, Beth. Now, here's one final point, though, that I think is based off of the common sense that our founder, Dan Celia, was so well known for. I remember him saying things like this to partners who are in these types of situations. I want you to consider, Beth, your portfolio, your investment portfolio is not an isolated entity. It's not just its own thing. It is part of your whole financial ecosystem. So you're not going to treat your financial portfolio the same way that you would your savings account, for example, or the equity that you've put in your home, for example, or something else like that, or maybe if you have debt, anything like that. They're all unique things, but they're all part of one cohesive ecosystem that you are in charge of. If you think of it that way, here's what I mean by this. Let's say you're in an example that I, God willing, will be in about I don't know, a couple decades or so, 15, 20 years, and you have an adult daughter at that point, and that adult daughter is about to get married, and you would like to pay for the wedding, and you've invested well, and you're up, say, 500, or as I've heard some of our partners say, 700%, and so you've got a lot of profits. I think it's totally fine for you to consider, after paying the inevitable capital gains tax, as James just experienced for us there, maybe consider using that to pay off the wedding rather than having to go into debt. Or I've heard even folks having to borrow against their 401k to do something like that. Maybe consider that.
I would think that would even be more than consideration. That would be encouraged, right? It's like we'd much rather you use that excess money, your winnings, as Seth has said, in a way, than go into debt. That would be crazy if you have the money right there.
This is common sense, folks. It's high level in the sense that, Sam and I are speaking generally here, but Sam, you're exactly right. I think common sense would tell me it'd be far better for you. Take those profits, pay for that. It's a gift, it's a wonderful thing, paying for a wedding or something like that. It doesn't have to be a wedding, it could be anything. It seems like a no-brainer to me. That's just me talking here, but I think that could be something for you to consider as kind of one caveat to what we said earlier about our profit-taking strategy. Common sense is crucial here, Beth. I really think so. I'd have no problem with you doing something like this, especially if you had invested well for a long time and you're reaping the benefits of it. And again, folks, please, hear me say this. We're talking about a situation of someone who has invested for a very long time, and we're assuming your profits are pretty extensive, something like that. Generally speaking, though, Beth, I think the wise rule of thumb is, as we said earlier, you redeploy those winning dollars for reinvestment. And so I think it's great to hear that you're thinking through this. It's a win-win either way, because if you haven't gotten much of those profits yet, you're asking the right questions. And if you have got those profits, that's great. You've made some profits. That's awesome. So either way, I think it's a win-win. And I think you're doing a great job. And I think you'll continue to do so if you have that mindset as kind of your anchor for you. So great question, Beth. Thanks for asking that. Let's see. Elsewhere we have on the chat here. Yeah, Lisa, my taxes, boo. Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't like taxes either. The way it goes.
I'd be more concerned if she said taxes, yay.
Yay, woohoo. Yeah, that's right. Not from Lisa in the chat, that's for sure. If I know Lisa well, definitely. So, as we await for the Epstein files to be released, folks, we'll make the most of our time here on financial issues. By the way, I did want to mention to you all the financial issues Bible study that we did this morning, Friday morning Bible study, should now be posted on the website. That was my fault. I did not post it as quickly as I would like to, so that should be up there now. If you missed our study this morning in Daniel chapter 3, you can go back and listen to that. I'm so grateful we have that option for partners now. If you are a partner, you can get access to the Bible study and listen on your leisure to past Bible studies. The regular Bible study, the live Bible study, is free, and it always will be at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. But I get, for many of us, that's not a convenient time, so if you're a partner, you can go back and listen at your leisure. Pretty good stuff. Forgot to mention, folks, oil is up right around now, trending around $73 a barrel or so. The U.S. 10-year Treasury yields easing slightly a little bit here. It's hanging right around 4.24 percentage points. So that's what we're looking at there in the markets. Dow Jones still positive. S&P 500 is still flat. The Nasdaq's creeping back up towards the flat line here. So we'll see what happens there with the remainder coming up here. Next week, folks, Shanna will be back, so I do hope that you will be gearing up for that. I'm excited for Shanna to come back. Did want to remind you also, once again, if there is a show where I am not on the show, you can assume that Megan and I are having our baby. So it's any day now. We're past 38 weeks, but I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that. You'll be in good hands with Shanna and Sam and the rest of the team here. All right, folks, we got Craig Halgard coming up here for the Ag Report, and then after that, we'll get to some more financial issues coming up here. Egg prices, not so excellent. We'll look at that, as well as the defunding of Planned Parenthood, hopefully, of which I would be all for. More financial issues coming up right after the Ag Report. We'll be back.
This is Craig Halgard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for February 28th. Well, most of yesterday's news was kind of pushed aside to make room for the tariff update from the White House. President Trump, after discussing pushing the tariff pause back to April 2nd, stated he's going to end up restarting that 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico on the 4th of March. This news brought aggressive fund selling as funds dumped roughly 10% of their ownership during yesterday's session. As a result, May corn was 12.5 cents lower at $4.81 per bushel. Tariff announcements against Mexico and Canada really didn't have much impact on the soybean complex, as China is the nation that the trade really associates with soybeans. So as a result, May beans were a touch lower, ended up down 4 cents at $10.3725. Wheat tariff talk absolutely tumbled wheat futures as they were down sharply in yesterday's session. Now, in the last 6 trading days, we've had wheat drop almost 60 cents per bushel. Weekly export sales also underperformed, despite the U.S. being in one of its best positions versus Russian competition that we've seen in recent weeks. Minneapolis May wheat finished the day 13 cents lower at 6.04 3/4. Kansas City was 13 1/4 cents lower at 5.85 1/4, and when Chicago was 17 1/4 cents lower at 5.62 1/2. Cotton futures continue to struggle. May futures ended the session 27 points lower at 66.60. Livestock futures were mixed. April live cattle were $1.50 higher at $196.12 per hundredweight. April feeder cattle were $2.02 stronger, settling at $275.55 per hundred. And April lean hog futures dropped by $3.92.5, ending the day at $84.37.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures closed higher for the second consecutive session. At the close, March futures were up 18 points at $19 even. Well, this has been Craig Howgard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
Hi, this is Sheena Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the preborn logo. Save a baby.
Club from other ministries to reach school-age children. What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Well, thank you all for joining us here on Financial Issues. Once again, good to see you all. So many: Brian, Claude, Dave and Darlene, Eddie, Lisa, as we mentioned earlier, and James, Lieutenant UJ. Good to see you, brother. Dave and Darlene, George. Welcome all of you to the chat. Bob there as well. Appreciate Bob from our neck of the woods here over in New Jersey. Good to see you guys there. Well, Sam, let's move now to what we teed up at the top of the show. Not so excellent, unfortunately. This egg crisis is ongoing. Trump is trying to do something about it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Sam. What do we got?
So Donald Trump is trying to tackle the egg crisis head on right now. The Department of Agriculture, they announced this week plans to import some eggs just to bring down the prices a tad. That is not a long-term plan, as they admit, but hopefully it will ease some of the problems, especially going into Easter when people really want their eggs. That move, of course, is part of a broader approach to bring the prices down long-term, including working with DOGE to perhaps reallocate some of the wasteful spending to fund things like vaccines, therapeutics, and biosecurity for the chickens so that maybe we can avoid future problems with the bird flu. Here is Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins talking about that earlier this week.
You got to think about strategically, how do we fix this for America for 5 years or 50 years? We're investing a lot of money into vaccine and therapeutic research to see if there is an answer to this right away. But all things considered, we see a significant plan with significant funds moving ahead, and the American taxpayers, American consumers, and American poultry farmers have relief coming right around the corner.
And Seth, that relief is desperately needed because the Agriculture Department also released a report this week saying that egg prices could increase over 40% this year. So that's on top of the increases we already saw last year. So it could get pretty expensive.
Absolutely. Folks, if you're curious about Craig Halgard's expertise on this, because he came on the show with me on Tuesday of this past week, February 25th, go back and listen to that segment that we did. It was a very good insight that Craig gave, especially for those of you who have what's called, like a backyard chicken coop, if you've got chickens maybe, as I know many of my friends do, and trying to protect them from this bird flu. Just some good insight on that there. I do think this is a topic, Sam, that we'll revisit with Craig again. I don't think this is going anywhere. But it's interesting, Sam. We criticized Trump earlier in the show for the whole Epstein file kerfluffle. I think it's good to be critical when things like that happen, and I think it's also good to praise when things seem to be put in place to be tackling issues that need to be tackled. I don't think that this avian flu is Trump's fault, and I also don't think that the egg crisis is Trump's fault either. I think he's inherited a crisis, as with so many other arenas, like the economy, like the border, like our stance in the military, like the several foreign wars that are going on right now. He inherited something really bad. Now he's got to fix it, and he's trying to do that. I really do. I think it's important for us to always remember where we came from. I'm a history guy. It's always good to look back and see, okay, what really happened here? And here's what it is. Here's what happened. Good to remind ourselves. In the midst of the conflicting stories from mainstream media, the origin of this bird flu, I don't know what it was from, but I do know that the egg numbers seem to, maybe they were impacted by the fact that a couple months before he left office, the Biden administration authorized the killing of a lot of chickens. I don't know the exact number. I know Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said it was 100 million. I don't know if it's that, but I'm sure it was a lot. That might, Sam, have a little something to do with egg prices rising. I don't know. Maybe.
Might. And Brooke Rollins in that interview, she said one of the reasons they want to invest so heavily in these therapeutics is the idea is like, maybe we could come up with a better solution than just having to cull all the chickens the second one of them gets sick. I mean, I understand that this thing is incredibly contagious, so the likelihood if one gets sick, then all of them are going to get sick, so you might as well just wipe out the whole flock. I understand that thinking, but what they're saying from the Trump administration, there's got to be a better way, so when this thing comes around again, as it inevitably will, we don't find ourselves in the same exact situation.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. This is simple supply and demand. If you cut off the supply, the demand's going to go up, and that's what the Biden administration did a couple months before they left office. So it's
funny enough, I know a guy who actually works in the egg industry, and he's not impacted by this at all. In fact, he's raking in the dough because you're right, demand is so high, supply is so low, and hey, he's the guy with the supplies, so he's really bringing it in, and he's pretty happy about all this.
Absolutely. And I would say too, for you folks, if you've got that backyard chicken coop, certainly make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep those chickens safe, but don't fret either. I mean, you now have a hot commodity. You have natural egg producers, and those eggs are like gold, man.
Closest thing to laying the golden egg you have right in your backyard.
This is the golden egg right here, I'm telling you. So don't fret about this. You might actually be in a really good situation for yourself here. Obviously, just making sure that your chicken chickens are kept safe from this. And again, if you want more info on that, go back and listen to Craig's interview that we did earlier this week. Important to see that. Cleanup's going to take time and effort. So we'll keep an eye on this for you folks. And this is something we'll come back to, I'm sure, from time to time. But let's move now here, Sam, to I think one of the most important headlines of the week here. So it looks like Senator Rand Paul is trying to defund Planned Parenthood. Now, I don't know if this will happen, but boy, am I ever for this. I think this
is
great.
So exciting, Seth. I mean, he's really trying to put teeth on what Trump has already done. So Trump has signed some executive orders right after entering office, defunding Planned Parenthood, ending the use of federal taxpayer dollars to fund or promote elective abortions. He did that through a couple different executive orders. And what Rand Paul's doing here so wisely is trying to legislate this, because when Trump's gone, this could easily be undone by a future Democrat president. What Rand Paul's trying to do here is get this thing on the books so it can never be reversed again. So it's called the Defund Planned Parenthood Act, and it simply says, quote, notwithstanding any other provision of law, no further federal funds may be made, that's kind of a tongue twister, available to Planned Parenthood Federation of America or to any of its affiliates. And according to LifeSite News, Planned Parenthood took in almost $700 million in government health services, reimbursements, and grants last year alone. So this really is going to knock the teeth out of Planned Parenthood if it gets enacted and put on the books, as we pray it is.
I really hope it does, Sam. Absolutely. This is great stuff, and I do hope that this legislation gets the legs it needs to be written into law. You're exactly right. You know, folks, one of the great tragedies of our day in this country might be the greatest, honestly. In fact, I'll go on the record and say it very well might be the greatest tragedy of the 20th century has been the genocide of millions of children. That's what it is. It's a genocide of millions of American children. We will never know the exact numbers. We just won't. I've heard anywhere between, in the Roe versus Wade age, anywhere between 60 to 65 million babies murdered, something like that. Just absolutely demonic. And one of the greater tragedies is that the most, and I'll go on record of saying this, the single most demonic baby murdering machine in human history, called Planned Parenthood, worse than Herod in Jesus' day, worse than Pharaoh in the days of the Exodus, they've been funded in part by our tax dollars. That's part of why this organization has become so wretched and so powerful also. I have no problem calling them demonic. I have no problem calling this organization demonic. They are in league with demonic forces in sacrificing children in much the same way that ancient world barbarians did to demon gods. Planned Parenthood is doing the exact same thing. It's no different. It's inside of the womb. That's the only difference. The location is different. This is grotesque. And here's my prayer for our nation with this, folks, and I'd urge you to join me in praying this. Not only that Senator Paul's legislation would be written into the law of the land and our tax dollars would be spared from funding demonic child sacrifice, but also that every single Planned Parenthood organization in this country would be permanently shut down. Every single one. Its doors never reopened. Not only would they lose their federal funding, but they would also lose their not-for-profit funding, because I believe they are a not-for-profit, which boggles my mind. I don't know how they are. And its employees immediately be put out of work. I would pray to that end. I would. And then I would urge you to pray that in their newfound free time, that every single one of these former Planned Parenthood employees would turn and beg for forgiveness at the feet of Jesus Christ and become Christians. And they would trust in Christ. And perhaps if they're not, they would then get married and have children of their own. That would be an amazing redemption story. That would be amazing. I would celebrate this. I would welcome each and every one of these former Planned Parenthood employees into the Christian family with open arms. And I hope you would do the same. I would love to see this.
Amen, Seth.
Love to see
That's
this.
great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what's sad about this, though, is that as many Christians may be listening to this and celebrating this, we support Rand Paul's bill. Yeah. A lot of them are probably actually funding Planned Parenthood without even knowing it by investing in companies that also donate their funds to Planned Parenthood. So that's the really tragic thing, is that it's not just coming from the federal government. Actually, Planned Parenthood makes more per year in private donations than from government donations. donations, and a lot of that is coming from investment dollars from those big corporate donors, and sadly, a lot of Christian funds are part of those donations.
Absolutely. Sam, you're spot on there. Not only are we offering you organizations like Preborn that fight against Planned Parenthood, but our investment strategy, folks, the FISM strategy is built to combat stuff like this. When you invest in companies that do not donate to Planned Parenthood, that's like a sword thrust to the heart against this monster. And we want you to be a part of that. We want you to take part in that battle that we're waging here. So I hope that can be encouraging for you folks. I would urge you to pray that way. Absolutely. And I would also urge you, if you are interested in looking for an organization that fights against Planned Parenthood actively, Preborn is the place to go. Folks, let me close our show here with this verse to send you to your weekend, Ephesians 3:20-21. Now to him who's able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations, forever and ever. Amen. God bless you all. I hope you have a wonderful day of worship on Sunday. God willing, we'll come back again on Monday for more financial issues. Remember, all you have belongs to the Lord. Let's be found good and faithful servants. God bless.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.